Hey, this is Tony from Fantasy Quick Hits. Gonna cover our Week 9 matchups. I'm gonna jump right into things today, and I'm gonna start with the Saints and the Falcons. A little bit of a surprise here with the Saints. We all expected Taysom Hill to get the start, and it looks like it's going to be Trevor Siemian behind center. He looked decent last week. Could be a nice spot start versus a struggling Atlanta defense. Um, we don't know how much Taysom will play. We can at least expect him to steal some touches inside the 10. I would sit Trevor this week and see what we have in him first. That said, if you're in a two quarterback or super flex league, this matchup definitely is intriguing against the Falcons. Alvin Kamara, I do like him more without Taysom Hill at quarterback. Elite running back, elite volume. You can't bench Kamara. Mark Ingram looked great last week, not playable in fantasy lineups. He is a less an option with Taysom's goal line carries and rushing attempts. Marquez Callaway, uh, you know, again, Simeon looked decent, but not known for his deep throws. I think I'm just staying away from the Saints wide receivers. We need to see what we have in this offense and what it looks like with Trevor Simeon before we can trust any of these wide receivers. Adam Troutman, tight end, not an option at all. With the Falcons, Saints have been very, very tough against opposing quarterbacks, ranking in the top 5. Ridley is now officially on IR. So outside of Pitts, I just don't trust these receivers. And I'm not comfortable starting Ryan here. You've got to bench him this week. Mike Davis, Saints are brutal matchup for running backs, and let alone Mike Davis, who hasn't really seen consistent volume in this backfield. He isn't involved in the passing game. Sit him this week. Cordarrelle Patterson, look for him to continue to be heavily involved, especially now with Ridley on IR. He has a definite role, which seems to be growing. Start him with confidence, as he will get touches and he will get his targets as well. I do want to cover the receivers real quick for the Falcons. And Russell Gage, out of all the Falcons receivers, I think I like Gage the most. He is the factory number one receiver now in this offense. He has shown the ability to produce without Julio and without Ridley in the lineup. However, I don't like that we saw last week that he has the potential to post 0 targets. And for me, he's rosterable. I'm just not starting him right now, especially against this very tough Saints D. Kyle Pitts, Saints have been tough against opposing tight ends, but Pitts doesn't really line up like a traditional tight end. If you have him, he's in your lineup. He just is not benchable due to his high weekly ceiling and potential. Without Ridley, look for Ryan to lean on him even more. With that, let's jump into the next game, Denver versus Dallas. Start on the Denver side of the ball. We have Teddy Bridgewater. Um, Teddy isn't the worst quarterback in the league, but he's not going to win you a week either. I see him as a weekly top 15 to 20 type quarterback, or not top, but somewhere in that 15 to 20 range with very limited upside. Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. Williams should be the leading back in this backfield, but Gordon is still out touching him, along with those quality touches at the goal line. If you must play one of these running backs, I think Gordon is your guy. That said, neither of these two running backs really excite me. Williams is mostly touchdown dependent. I see them both mostly as a flex option. Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Yes, I think you're starting both Sutton and Jeudy against this Dallas pass defense. The Denver offense has been sputtering, but the volume will be there for both of these wide receivers as we look for them to try and keep pace with this high-powered Dallas offense. Tim Patrick with Jerry Jeudy back, we can no longer trust Patrick. Noah Fant, I want to keep an eye on the injury report. It's looking like Fant is going to miss this game due to being on the COVID list. If he does play, I do like him as kind of a mid-range tight end too this week versus Dallas. On Dallas side, Prescott, I mean, this guy is a matchup-proof QB with his weapons. He's in your starting lineup. Zeke is a weekly top 5 running back. Tony Pollard, if you're hurting at running back, I think you could do worse than Pollard. He has a decent floor, but he also has a very low ceiling. Mari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, tough defense, but you're starting both of these guys. Both are solid to kind of high end wide receiver two with upside, especially with Dak back behind center this weekend. You've got to roll them both out. Cedric Wilson, he's an exciting player. We saw him make that incredible pass on the run last week, but he's just not startable as a receiver. You're going to bench him. Dalton Schultz, you're going to roll him out this week as a top 10 tight end, even in a difficult matchup. He does have a defined role in this offense, and he does also show that he has the potential to score. They do look his way in the red zone. Let's move on to the Panthers versus the Patriots. Start on the Patriot side, Mac Jones, unless you're playing in that two quarterback or super flex league, you're going to sit him against the Panthers. Damian Harris, he's looked great recently, but he's had mostly easy matchups. The Panthers are brutal against opposing running backs, and Harris is a touchdown dependent fantasy running back who doesn't really garner any usage at all in the passing game. His stat line could easily for this game be 15 carries for 50 yards. I'm looking elsewhere if I can. Jacoby Myers, if you're looking for a safe 6 points this week, then you start Myers. But for most of us, the low ceiling is tough to roll out every week. Carolina is brutal. They're brutal against the pass. I'm leaving Myers on my bench. Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne, you can't trust either one of these guys in this matchup. Hunter Henry, don't like this matchup versus the Panthers, and I'm just not comfortable starting him this week. Also, Smith is now back from his injury, making really both of them unplayable against one of the toughest defenses against opposing tight ends. For the Panthers, we're not sure if we're going to see Darnold this week, but it doesn't matter. His recent quarterback play has really limited his upside. I think he's only rosterable at this point in two quarterback leagues. Christian McCaffrey, let's keep an eye on the injury report. Carolina is hopeful that he can play on Sunday, but expect him to be on a pitch count. If you have him, I know you're dying to get him in your lineup. I just don't like the start this week. Hubbard, if Carolina does get CMC back, obviously Hubbard is not going to be in your lineup. If CMC is out, Hubbard's not been tremendous. I view him as a flex play against this Patriot defense. DJ Moore has really been impacted by the poor play of Darnold. We've seen DJ Moore's ceiling come down quite a bit. If you have to start this guy, I'd start him, but I would expect another very poor outing against a tough New England defense. Belichick is known for taking away the number one offensive weapon on the opposing team, and I think right now, their game plan to take out DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson, too risky. I don't even think he's rosterable right now, and neither of the Panthers tight ends are playable. Let's move on to the Vikings versus the Ravens. Let's start with the Vikings. Kirk Cousins. He has been mostly consistent this year. Baltimore is more of a neutral matchup. I see Cousins ranked kind of in that 10 to 15 range. Justin Jefferson, I know he had a down week, but he's a top 5 wide receiver every week. You're going to start him. Adam Thielen. Baltimore's been tough against opposing wide receivers, but Thielen has been playing out of his mind lately. So for me, I'm going to enjoy the ride while it lasts. I don't think you can bench this guy right now. KJ Osborne, I like him, but I don't think we can trust him in lineups just yet. He's more of a stash in case anything happens to Jefferson or Thielen. I jumped over Dalvin Cook, and I really shouldn't have to talk about Dalvin Cook. He's a plug and play. He's a top 5 potential every week. So, of course, he's in your lineup. Tyler Conklin, believe it or not, Baltimore has been one of the worst defense against opposing tight ends in fantasy. If there was a week to roll out Conklin, I think this is it. I see him as a top 10 option this week based on a steady target share. Last week alone, he had 7 targets. On the Ravens side, start with Lamar Jackson. You're always starting Lamar. He has one of the highest ceilings of all fantasy quarterbacks, largely due to those rushing yards that he picks up, and he's always a threat to score. Ravens running backs, I think we've learned by now that we cannot trust any of the running backs in this backfield for 2021. I would just stay away from all these guys. Marquise Brown has a great matchup. I love him in this game as a top 5 receiver play. Rashad Bateman, he's more of a gamble, but with Watkins banged up and Baltimore wanting to get this kid more involved in this offense, I like him as a high-end wide receiver 3 against a very porous Minnesota pass defense. That said, I also did see Bateman pop up on the injury report with the groin issue. So he's a little dinged up. He's questionable for Sunday. Keep an eye on his status. Just make sure he's active. And then Mark Andrews, I mean, he's an obvious top 3 tight end play every week. Let's go on to the Browns versus the Bengals. On the Browns side, Baker Mayfield. Cincinnati is more of a neutral plus matchup. Cleveland, I think, is going to need to score points, and I see Baker ranked around maybe like the number 15 quarterback with upside on Sunday. Look for them to prove a point this week without OBJ. Jarvis Landry, without OBJ, who was just released, Landry's value takes a major, major boost. This guy has always shown the ability to put up big numbers when OBJ is out. So, regardless of the matchup, Landry now is a high volume wide receiver. I'm going to look for him to eat up the Bengals this week on those check down looks, which the Bengals are very soft on and post wide receiver 2 numbers. Rashad Higgins, I like Higgins, but not trustworthy with Landry back, and I'm not putting him on my lineup. Austin Hooper and David Njoku, unless one of these guys go down, they really eat each other's value. On top of that, it's a tough matchup here against Cincinnati. It's hard to play either one. On the Bengals side, Joe Burrow is mostly a high floor quarterback in fantasy. He's been quite consistent. Cleveland is a positive matchup for the quarterback position, and I do like Burrow in that 10 to 15 range this week. Joe Mixon, while Cleveland is a mostly a positive matchup for Burrow and the wide receivers, they've been brutal against opposing running backs. So Mixon this week has a much lower ceiling versus this Browns D. Perrine is beginning involved too. So I see him kind of as a low end RB2, high end RB3 this week. Jamar Chase, I don't see him keeping up his early season pace, but you're not benching Chase. Chase is in your lineup. T. Higgins, I think he's due to explode any week now, but I see him more as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy with upside. If you have him, he has been getting volume, so he does have a decent floor. Tyler Boyd has been too unpredictable for my taste. Unless something happens to Chase or Higgins, I'm leaving this guy on my bench. And CJ Uzuma, popular waiver wire tight end, especially after that 2 touchdown game a couple of weeks ago, but he has a very, very low volume target share, and it does not support him as a weekly play. He's a highly dependent touchdown tight end. He wouldn't even be on my roster. Bills versus Jags. This is an easy one. Josh Allen. He could be the top start at quarterback every week, especially this week against the Jags. You're going to roll him out with confidence. Zach Moss. He's not the most talented running back in the league, but he is starting to get some consistent volume, including this target share now in the passing game, averaging 5 targets a game over the past 3 weeks. On this offense with goal line looks, I really, to believe it or not, I see him as a low end RB2. Singletary, as Moss is on the rise, I think Singletary's value is heading in the opposite direction. You're not going to play him even in this nice matchup. Stephon Diggs, no brainer. You're going to start him. Cole Beasley. Jags have been one of the worst teams in the league against slot receivers. And I think this could be another great, great spot for Beasley. I like him a lot as a high wide receiver 2 in this matchup. Manuel Sanders, of course, we like him too against this Jags defense. Because Beasley in that slot role, we've got Diggs. I see Sanders more as a high end 3 with the potential for a touchdown. Tommy Sweeney, he's been involved with this passing offense. I see him as a great spot play this week. I believe we're going to watch him get in the action too. On the Jaguar side, the entire offense, and I'm going to keep it simple. You're going to sit the entire offense for the Jaguars against this Bills defense. We might see another shutout this weekend. And I just don't trust anyone on this offense against Buffalo. James Robinson, who maybe is the only one, is already banged up. I'm not sure if he's going to play this week, but even so, we're not starting anyone on the Jags. Next game, Texans versus the Dolphins. Let me start on the Texans side. Tyrod Taylor is looking like a go versus the Dolphins defense, which has allowed top 4 production to opposing quarterbacks. So you're going to roll out Tyrod Taylor this week and look at him as a top 10 to 12 option. David Johnson. No. Many of you ran out and grabbed this guy when Ingram moved on to the Saints, and it certainly sounded interesting. But not only must you sit him, I think David Johnson, you should also outright drop him. He isn't going anywhere. Brandon Cooks with Tyrod. I think Cooks is back to being a top 10 fantasy wide receiver due to his incredible volume. He owns 45% of his team's air yards. Incredible. Nico Collins and Dami Amendola, not startable. Jordan Akins, you can find a better option at tight end. On the Dolphins side, we'll start with Tua. He has a great matchup this week versus the Titans, who have been a top three matchup for quarterbacks. I like him to score 25 plus points this week. Miles Gaskin is coming off a rough matchup last week versus the Bills. He gets a much easier one this week for the worst defense against the run this year. That said, even with Malcolm Brown out of the picture, I still have a little bit of a difficult time fully trusting in Gaskin. If you have him, you have to play him in this spot. You have no choice. Worst defense against running backs, you've got to start Gaskin. I'm just not a believer until we can see him string a few positive games together. That all said, I do see him as a top play 12 this week, mostly due to the matchup. And if he doesn't get it straight this week, we've got major concerns on Miles Gaskin. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker has been put on AR, so that definitely boosts Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki. If you do have Waddle, you're starting him this week. Houston ranks near the bottom of the league with yards allowed to wide receivers. Big surprise. Look for him to be in the wide receiver two. I don't want to push it too much. Let's say high end wide receiver two range. Mike Gesicki. Houston is one of the best matchups for opposing tight ends, and I think we can trust him this week as a low end tight end one against this Texans D. Let's move on to the Raiders versus the Giants. Start with Derek Carr with the Raiders. Great matchup for Carr coming off a bye. I'm going to roll him out as a top 12 option. Josh Jacobs is looking healthy after the bye week. Gets a nice matchup versus a suspect Giants run defense. New York is near the top of the league for yards allowed to opposing running backs. And I really like Jacobs in this spot. I see him as a solid high end RB2. Kenyon Drake, more of a low end flex play with Jacobs now healthy. However, it will be interesting to see if they incorporate Drake more in the passing game with Ruggs out of the picture. Hold and sit on Drake. Let's see what this offense looks like. Hunter Renfro takes a boost with Ruggs being out and no longer on this Raiders offense. He might be the safest option at wide receiver. He's more of a high end wide receiver four, low end wide receiver three, due to his cap ceiling as more of a volume receiver. Zay Jones and Brian Edwards. It looks like Zay Jones is going to be replacing Ruggs, but I want and wait and see before I plug any of these guys into my lineup. And Darren Waller, regardless of his recent drop off, he has weekly top three potential. He's a definite start. The Giants side will go with Daniel Jones at first here. I don't really like him at all this week. He doesn't have any healthy wide receivers. Barkley is still out. Outside of a nice game against the Saints in week 4, he's been a major bust this year. You're going to sit him. Devontae Booker, I love Devontae Booker in this matchup. With the injuries at the wide receiver position, Booker is going to be a very, very, very active guy on Sunday in a very positive matchup for running backs. He has a role in this passing game. He gets solid touches, including those goal line looks. I see him as a high-end running back too. Kenny Golladay, he's trending towards missing this week. Darius Slayton, not trustworthy. Kadarius Toney, again, I like Toney. I've talked about him. He might be the most talented wide receiver on this Giants roster. They just don't get him enough involved in this passing game. And keep an eye on the injury report. It's looking like Shepard's going to miss time, which could boost Toney's value. But again, he's also dinged up. Evan Ingram, he's a mostly touchdown dependent tight end. Not enough volume to start him. And Kyle Rudolph, this guy's not startable either. Let's go on to the Chargers versus the Eagles. We'll start on the Chargers side. Justin Herbert. This is a neutral matchup for quarterbacks. I just think Herbert is due to get back on track, and I'm starting him in this matchup. The Eagles have been susceptible to top end quarterback play. And so they've given up an average of 35 points a game to Brady, Mahomes, Carr, and I'm just rolling him out this week because Herbert is, believe it or not, a high end quarterback. and I do expect him to get back on track. Austin Eckler is a top 5 running back potential and a great matchup for running backs. Keenan Allen is a high target volume wide receiver. He's a weekly start regardless of matchup. Mike Williams, I know he's been struggling, but I'm starting him in this week's matchup. The guy is really due to break back out and get on track. I think this is a get right game for Mike Williams. I'm starting him. Jared Cook has a nice matchup here, but he hasn't been dependable and he's a little too risky for my taste. On the Eagles side, we'll start with Jalen Hurts. He gives you a high floor with his rushing ability, but a really tough matchup this week. He only threw the ball 14 times last week, for this week, I really see him ranked in that 15 to 20 range. The running backs for the Eagles, I'm staying away from this committee backfield. They leaned heavily on the run game last week with over 40 rush attempts. Now, the Chargers have allowed the most rushing yards to opposing running backs. I just don't know which running back in this committee is going to produce. I do expect Gainwell to have a larger role. There's just too many questions here for my taste. I'm not starting any of them. If you have to start one, I think you have to go with Scott just based on what we saw last week and the potential for them to lean on the run game this week. But it's just too risky for me. Devonta Smith against the soft Charger run defense, we could see another down game for Smith because while the Chargers have been easy against the run, not so against the pass, where they rank in the top 3. So again, I'm leaving him on my bench, and I'm looking for the Eagles to lean a little bit more on that running attack. Jalen Rager and Quez Watkins, the Blues guys are too risky. You're not starting either one of them. Dallas Goddard, this guy's now a top 5 option every week with Ertz gone. You're going to start him. Let's go on to the Packers versus the Chiefs. Jordan Love's getting the start this week, and this is an interesting game to start versus the Chiefs. He has some nice options, but I think this could easily turn into an Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon game. I don't trust Love completely in this matchup. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, we're going to look for Green Bay to lean heavily on the run game again. Dillon could look to get another 15 plus carries between the tackles, while Jones, I think, is still the running back to own. He's a lock for 20 plus touches, including a nice dose of targets, and he gets all the goal line looks. So I know for those of you who are thinking A.J. Dillon is a threat to Aaron Jones, not so. Aaron Jones is still the man. Devontae Adams, it stinks not having Rodgers in this matchup, but I wouldn't completely panic on Adams. Look for Love to look Adams' way quite often, and what could turn into a high-scoring game. You're going to roll out Adams. Just temper your expectations a little bit. Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, I'm not starting either one of those. And I don't even know where you go with tight end. You're not starting a tight end with the Packers. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's a top 5 quarterback potential each week. You're going to roll him out. Darrell Williams, he's getting plenty of usage in this offense. CEH is still out, so you're going to play Williams here. You're going to expect another strong outing. I'm thinking 15 to 20 touches. He's a low-end RB2 in this matchup. Tyreek Hill, he could be the best fantasy receiver in fantasy right now. Mecole Hardman, not involved enough. Hill owns this passing game. Demarcus Robinson, I'll pass. Travis Kelce, always a top 2 option. Let's go on to the Cardinals versus the 49ers. Kyler Murray, it's really looking like he's going to miss this game on Sunday. You're hearing the team say a lot of things similar to what we heard the Cowboys saying about Dak last week, that the season is bigger than one game and he hasn't practiced all week. If he is active, of course, you're going to start him. It's a no-brainer. Let's go on to Chase Edmonds. Love his talent. If Murray is out, I think his ceiling skyrockets as the team could look to really ride the running game. With Murray, I see him as a low RB3 flex play. Without Murray, he's more of a mid-range, high-end RB2. James Conner is just not garnering enough volume to make him trustworthy. With or without Murray, I see him as a flex play who is touchdown dependent. DeAndre Hopkins, I don't like how things are looking with his hammy. Even if he starts, I just don't want another game where he starts the game and then leaves early. So we might need to look elsewhere. Keep an eye on that injury and the pregame report before deciding. But I'm personally really leaning on sitting him this week. I do have stock in Hopkins, so that's going to hurt. AJ Green, can't bring myself to trust this guy. Christian Kirk and Rondale Moore. If Hopkins is out, I like both of these guys in this matchup, assuming that Murray plays. If Murray is out, I'm benching these wide receivers because I don't know who to trust. Zach Ertz, we're not really seeing many of what we expected with him in Arizona. He just isn't getting enough looks to make him trustworthy, so I would stay away from him this week. On the 49ers side, Jimmy G, you cannot roll him out against this Cardinals defense. They've been brutal for opposing quarterbacks, ranking in the top three against the quarterback position. Elijah Mitchell is a volume based runner in a highly productive zone blocking scheme that the 49ers employ. He is a lock weekly for 18 to 20 touches, making him a must start. You just can't find that type of elite volume. Even against this Cardinals defense, you're starting Mitchell. You maybe temper expectations a little bit. He's maybe a low end RB2, high end RB3, but you're going to start him. Debo Samuel, he's a weekly top start, but again, at this recording, it's looking like he is not going to be in the lineup this week. Brandon Ayuk, he looks like he's starting to work his way back into this offense. I'm not 100% ready to start him, but if Samuel is out, you've got to get this guy going. I do want to see what develops over the next game or two before plugging him in regularly, but I do like where this could be headed. George Kittle, if he's active, which it looks like he is trending towards, you're going to play him. Let's go on to the Titans versus the Rams. On the Titans side of the ball, Ryan Tannehill has a rarely just a rough matchup without Henry. AJ's banged up. I'm sitting Tannehill this week. I'd rather grab someone like a Jordan Love off of waivers and plug him into my lineup than roll out Tannehill against this Rams defense. We've got both AP and Jeremy McNichols. Everyone's going crazy this week on waivers for one of these two guys. We don't really know what this backfield is going to look like. Here's what we do know. McNichols is not mostly, McNichols is a career third down pass catching back on a team that doesn't dump off passes to the running back. And AP is 36 and hasn't played football in quite some time, but it sounds like they love the way this guy looks. He came into camp or into practice in tremendous shape. They've already made him active. They've already said that they're not going to dial down the running game at all. So AP is going to get the bulk of these carries. The Titans did add Donta Foreman. At the end of the day, neither do these guys is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is one of one. But even if AP is 70% of Henry, that's an RB2. So I just don't know if we can trust this backfield completely until we see it. And this happens to be a very brutal matchup versus a very tough Rams defense. So lower your expectations this week. AJ Brown, if he's healthy, he's a must start every week. Julio Jones looks like he could be getting healthy. I do not trust him in my lineup. I do have stock in Julio, and I've been burned a couple times this year, looking like he was healthy and then getting pulled out after he's re-injured that hamstring. He's just a very, very risky play due to his high re-injury risk. Tight end, there's just too many tight ends in this rotation in Tennessee, so we're going to stay away. On the Rams side, Matthew Stafford, this guy just cannot be benched. Top three quarterback. Darrell Henderson, if you have Hendy, you're starting him. He's involved with the running game, the passing game in this high-powered offense. Get him into your lineup of what could be a very favorable matchup this week. Cooper Kupp. Is there ever a situation when you would bench Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp is starting. Robert Woods. There are some question marks about Robert Woods. I mean, he has this injury. He's been missing practice. He hasn't practiced all week. I'd be concerned to roll him out unless he's fully healthy. Again, I don't want to play a guy at the receiver position dealing with the foot injury and then have him get pulled after he starts the game. Van Jefferson, I love this kid, Van Jefferson. And I think the Rams made a statement about him when they released Djax. Last week, Van Jefferson was right in line with Kupp and with Bobby Trees with his snap share, his routes run, and his target share. They were almost identical between the three of them. Look for him to develop a real definite role in this offense. He is, to me, a solid wide receiver 3 with upside, as the Rams are going to use him to stretch the field. And we know Stafford can get him the ball. With Woods banged up, Van Jefferson can really explode onto the scene this week. Tyler Higbee, The Titans have been very, very easy on opposing tight ends. So if you have Higbee, you're probably going to start him in this spot. However, we haven't really seen him involved too much in this offense to trust him. I would personally rather roll out another tight end who has demonstrated a high floor and or a high ceiling. And we're going to wrap up with our Monday night game with the Bears versus the Steelers. Very much similar to the Jags on the Bear side. I mean, on the Bear side, we're going to bench the entire offense against this Steeler defense. I don't trust any of these guys against this Steeler D. On the Steeler side, Big Ben has an injured pec. So you've got to be ready if you have him. If he is declared out Monday night, you've got to have another option. So if you have another option, I would lean towards rolling out that other option because you don't want to go into Monday night and he's not active and you have nobody else to plug in. So that is an issue. And the same that applies to this receiving group, depending on who is starting on Monday night. Najee Harris, regardless of the status with Big Ben, is a no brainer. Deontay Johnson is a must play. Chase Claypool, I like Claypool a lot, and I see him as a weekly play. He's a high end wide receiver 3, and Pat Freiermuth. This guy is really coming on, and Big Ben loves to utilize the tight end. I trust him as a top 12 tight end with season long upside. I think that wraps up all of our games. I appreciate all of you who took the time to watch this video. Please like, please subscribe. I do appreciate your support. And one other thing before I let you go, if you notice, I'm wearing red shirt. I'm going to back up here so you can see my Daniel Defense red. For those of you who don't know, red is to remember everyone deployed. I'm a veteran myself. We've got 150 to 200,000 troops deployed across the world. So when you see me wearing red on Fridays, that's what that's all about. Thank you all.